Good.
Shalom Uvracha, the Jewish Library, the Beit Midrash, our Torah. Today I want to tell you about one very famous author and one very famous book. Rav Kook, Orot HaKodesh. Rabbi Kook's works all have the name Orot, lights, in the title. One of his most famous series of books is called Orot HaKodesh, Lights of Holiness. And what I want to tell you about is how we come to have such a book. Rav Kook lived in the end of the 1800s into the 1900s. He died in the 1930s. He became the first Ashkenazi rabbi of Palestine, of the land of Israel at the time. Born in Europe, Lithuania, eventually comes to Israel and becomes the rabbi of Yafo and the surrounding Moshavim, the rabbi of the new settlers, the rabbis of all those people who love the land of Israel and want to make it grow, but they're not so religious. Come along to the First World War, and just before the First World War, Rav Kook gets an invitation to come and speak at the National International Conference of Agudat Yisrael in Europe. He debates, should he leave the Holy Land, should he not? His wife's not well, the doctor says maybe she'll do better in Europe. He decides he'll go for a quick trip to Europe and speak at the conference. He gets to Europe, the shot is fired in Sarajevo, the First World War breaks out, the conference is cancelled. But Rav Kook has the wrong passport and he can't get back to the land of Israel. He's stuck in Europe for the whole war. The first 2 years of the war, he lives in a friend's house in Switzerland. His son, Rav Tzvi Yehuda, comes and they learn Torah day and night. The next 2 years, he gets invited to London and he becomes the rabbi of a community in London. He's in London to be able to push for the Balfour Declaration, divine organization. And then at the end of the war, he comes back to Israel. I want to speak to you about that period of time when he's in Switzerland. He's sitting in Switzerland, unable to be a rabbi of his community in Yafo in Israel, homeless, sitting with his son, Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook, learning Torah. At that time, there's a very interesting young man. His name is David Cohen. David Cohen comes from a rabbinic family and has learned in some of the top yeshivot in Europe. He's learned in Telz. He's learned in Radin with the Chofetz Chaim. But his soul yearns for pure godliness, yearns perhaps for even prophecy. He desires the truth, but he's sitting in yeshiva, and even though he's a great Torah scholar, Baba Batra, Baba Metzia, the Gemara just doesn't do it for him. He wants absolute truth. So he leaves the yeshiva and goes off to university. Goes off to university in order to learn philosophy from its sources, to learn ancient Greek, to learn Latin, to learn Aristotle and Plato. In university, to strengthen his religiosity, still yearning for spirituality, he takes upon himself to be a Nazir, perhaps the first Nazirite since the destruction of the temple. He doesn't get a haircut, he doesn't go anywhere near wine or grapes, and he doesn't have any contact with dead bodies. He also becomes a vegetarian, and he doesn't wear leather, and he's a great mystic, but he's in university learning secular philosophy. A very interesting, deep spiritual man, searching for a rabbi. Someone tells him, there's a rabbi stuck in Switzerland. You need to speak to him. He could become your rabbi. He writes to Rav Kook, and Rav Kook says, come visit. Rav David Cohen takes his pocket watch, pawns it to get money for the train trip, travels to where Rav Kook is in Switzerland, goes to the mikveh in the River Rhine, takes a holy book, and goes and knocks on Rav Kook's door. And he writes to us in the introduction to Orot HaKodesh that he walks into Rav Kook, and Rav Kook is sitting there learning with his son. And he has a discussion about Greek philosophy. And says, Rav David Cohen, it doesn't do it. He says, as a person who'd learned that from the original sources, Rav Kook, who had learned it through the Rambam and through the holy books, the discussion didn't go as well as the Nazir would have liked it. And he was very unimpressed. Rav Kook says, stay the night. It's late. David Cohen writes that as he lay on his bed in the guest room that night, he felt his whole life was in the balance. What would be with him? It comes morning, He's been restless and unsleeping all night. And in the next room, he hears footsteps. And he hears Rav Kook davening the morning blessings, saying the Akedah, singing in a voice that reminds him of the heavenly angels. And at that point, he knew he'd found himself a rabbi. He hurried to write in his diary, "More than I hoped for, I received. I found for myself a rabbi." When he tells his story, he tells the difference between content and form, between pure knowledge and the spiritual tune that it travels on. The Nazir, Rav David Cohen, was looking not just for the knowledge, but for the vessels that knowledge is resting in. And in Rav Kook, he found a Holy Spirit, a holy vessel. And so he wasn't worried whether the knowledge was what he wanted. He knew that the spirit, the tune, the movement of Rav Kook was what he was looking for. He then cleaved to his soul to Rav Kook. When the war ended, he went back with him to Israel. He delved day and night in Rav Kook's Beit Midrash in Jerusalem. 7 years he learned with Rav Kook, not moving from him. And then one day he writes, he went to Rav Kook and he said, "Rabbi, tell me, I see you have a spirit here. I see you have a light. I see you have holiness. But do you have a system? Do you have a content? Do you have a particular religious philosophy that's uniquely yours?" And Rav Kook smiled and said, "Of course." And he gave him 8 large diaries of Rav Kook's daily spiritual journey that he wrote for himself. And he gave it to David Cohen and he said, "Here, take this is my writings. Edit them and bring them out to the world." At that point, David Cohen started going through Rav Kook's spiritual diaries, his daily entries of spiritual wisdom, editing, putting it in order, and creating a structure that he eventually brought out as the works Orot HaKodesh. The first volume he brought out in Rav Kook's lifetime. Rav Kook saw it and made his comments on it and small editorial features, and it was printed in Rav Kook's lifetime. The later versions, after Rav Kook had already passed away. This, like most of Rav Kook's books, is Rav Kook's Torah, organized for us by his students into subject matters. Rav Kook wrote about himself that he feels restricted. He's unable to take the brilliant lights and spiritual flows that he have and limit them to structure, to form. So he wrote in this stream of spiritual consciousness, and it took his students, the Nazir, David Cohen, and his son, Rav Tzvi Yehuda, to go and edit those and put them in the forms we have today of the subjects of Orot HaKodesh, Orot HaTshuvah, Orot HaTorah, each one of the books of Rav Kook that addresses different spiritual issues. So let me just start by telling you the very beginning of Orot HaKodesh. The beginning structure starts talking about what is Chochmat HaKodesh. Chochmah is wisdom. Wisdom, we understand, being students of the world of Greece, being part of Western learning, wisdom is looking at the world and trying to understand it. Physics, nature, science, the arts. It starts with the world and our understanding. Kodesh, holiness. Holiness starts with God and comes down towards us. Rav Kook starts his talk, this book, by addressing the subject of Chochmat HaKodesh, the wisdom of holiness. And Rav Kook says that these two things do come together, that holiness can be studied as a wisdom. Ata chonen l'adam dat. God does give us wisdom. Wisdom and holiness go together. But how do they go together? How does holiness, which begins beyond us, comes down from heaven towards us, fit in with wisdom, which starts with the human mind trying to achieve understanding upwards? And Rav Kook writes a very interesting thing. He writes that when we study holy wisdom, Chochmat HaKodesh, it does something that no secular wisdom can do. It changes our very nature. Because holy wisdom starts from outside us, starts from heaven, and comes down into us. It has the ability to uplift us, to change us, to connect us to that pure Holy Spirit of the pure holiness. May we all merit to involve ourselves in Chokhmat Kodesh, to learn Torah, have it come into our souls and elevate us to make us, Am Yisrael, in the world, a more godly place. Highly recommended. Great book in Rav Kook's Torah, Orot HaKodesh, the Torah of Rav Kook, edited by the Nazir. See you in the Beit Midrash.